She knows what she wants tonight. Moves fast like a neon tide. Confidence in every line. She's got style to find.
The Package, Chapter 8. Minutes after the Exodus pulse, the world had gone silent. The vibrant tapestry of city lights that had stretched across the horizon, a testament to human ingenuity and consumption, had been extinguished in a single, terrifying instant. Lance Hunter and Sarah Walker stood in the cavernous hangar surrounded by dead machinery, the faint scent of ozone clinging to the air. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant, eerie sound of car alarms, those few analog models that had somehow escaped the EMP's total annihilation, wailing their final, dying breaths before succumbing. "Well, that's not ideal," Hunter muttered, his voice surprisingly calm despite the catastrophe. He tried the jet's comms again, then slapped the unresponsive panel. "Definitely not ideal. Looks like your EMP wasn't just a threat, it was the main event." Sarah didn't respond immediately. Her eyes, wide and focused, were scanning the darkened landscape beyond the hangar doors. Her mind, however, was a maelstrom of data. The intersect. It was still working. Not in a flashing, overwhelming burst, but as a constant, low-level hum, processing the new reality. Images of power grids, global communication networks, logistical chains, all overlaid with red, indicating failure. Financial markets crashing, air traffic falling out of the sky. The sheer, catastrophic scale of it was almost incomprehensible, yet her mind grasped it, cataloging every single detail. The intersect, unlike the digital systems it had been designed to populate, was a biological construct, embedded within her neural pathways. It wasn't a computer that could be fried. It was a part of her, a living, breathing database, and it was screaming 1,000 warnings at her now. "It's global," Sarah finally said, her voice tight with the weight of the information. "Every unprotected electronic system, every grid, they just plunged the world into the dark ages, literally." Hunter looked at her sharply. "How do you know that? Your comms are dead, same as mine." Sarah met his gaze, a flicker of raw truth in her eyes, a truth she rarely revealed. "I just do." She couldn't explain the intersect, not now, not to a stranger, not when the world was ending. "We need to get to S.H.I.E.L.D. now. They're the only ones with a chance of understanding what just happened and what's coming next." Hunter nodded, his professional instincts kicking in. "Agreed. First things first, secure this hangar, then we find something that moves, and doesn't rely on a microchip." He glanced at the grounded jet, then back at the dark horizon. "Welcome to the Stone Age, mate." In the industrial park, the silence after the EMP was a terrifying vacuum, punctuated only by the heavy breathing of John Casey and the groans of the Centipede operatives. He moved like a ghost, relying on the primal instincts honed by decades of combat. The Centipede agents, disoriented by the sudden failure of their advanced gear, were easy targets for a man who knew how to fight dirty and analog. His rifle, stripped of its electronic sights, became a blunt instrument as much as a projectile weapon. He used it to crack skulls, to disable, to make noise. He took down 6 agents in quick succession, leaving them dazed and incapacitated. But more were coming, their heavy boots thudding on the concrete, their voices shouting in the darkness. Casey knew he couldn't take them all. His objective had shifted from escaping to inflicting maximum damage, creating enough chaos to ensure Sarah had truly gotten away. He saw the faint outlines of the men moving through the clutter of the industrial park. He pulled a handful of flashbangs from his belt, old-school versions that relied on chemical reactions, not electronics. He tossed them, one by one, into the approaching ranks. The sudden, blinding flashes and deafening reports shattered the silence, disorienting the Centipede operatives, making them stumble and cry out. In the brief, chaotic flashes of light, Casey saw Wraith, the Centipede operative he'd tracked from the meeting, emerge, his face a mask of furious determination. He was holding a heavy, old-fashioned shotgun. He wasn't the type to rely too heavily on technology. "Hey, Shield, there's no way out," Wraith roared, his voice filled with venom. "You won't escape." Casey grinned, a feral flash in the intermittent light. "Wouldn't dream of it, sunshine." He dropped his now empty rifle, pulling a heavy combat knife. He wasn't fighting to escape anymore. He was fighting to buy time. For Sarah. For the world. The silence was a physical weight, pressing down on Sarah Walker. The hangar was a cavern of useless technology, the sophisticated jet now just a dead bird. Hunter, ever pragmatic, had already secured the hangar doors, a grim determination etched on his face. "All right, mate," Hunter said, his voice cutting through the oppressive quiet. "No more tech, no comms, no bloody sat-nav. We're going old school." He pointed to a small, dusty garage door in the corner of the hangar. "There's usually a couple of bikes in there, dirt bikes, built like tanks, simple engines. They'll get us places." Sarah nodded, her mind already shifting gears, adapting to the new reality. Her intersect, no longer distracted by the torrent of digital data, was hyper-focused on the tangible. It was sifting through every piece of real-world information, mapping out routes, assessing resources, and predicting the immediate impact of the global blackout. She could feel the subtle tremors in the ground, the faint scent of diesel from an old generator somewhere, the changing air currents. The world was now a place of raw, unfiltered sensory input, and her enhanced mind was drinking it all in. "We need to get to the playground," Sarah stated, her voice firm. "Don't be trying to re-establish comms too. We have to reach them and coordinate. The director won't stop with just the EMP. This is just the beginning." "Agreed," Hunter replied, already moving towards the garage. "But first we get out of Dodge. And we figure out where we are relative to your playground. Got a map on you that doesn't need a battery?" Sarah reached into her now battered evening bag, retrieving a meticulously folded, laminated paper map of the northeastern United States. It was an old habit, a fallback in case of digital compromise. Now it was their lifeline. In the industrial park, John Casey was a force of nature in the gloom. The Centipede operatives, used to relying on their advanced gear, were disoriented. Casey moved with ruthless efficiency, his combat knife a blur, easing the concrete columns and abandoned machinery for cover. He was fighting for time, for Sarah, for a chance. But Wraith was different. He was old school too, relying on brute force and a surprising agility. His shotgun roared, the flash of its muzzle briefly illuminating the dark. He was leading the charge, driven by a primal fury. "You're a dead man," Wraith bellowed, closing the distance. Casey grunted, narrowly dodging a shotgun blast that splintered the concrete beside him. He saw an opening, a narrow gap between two stacked shipping containers. He dove for it, sliding through, just as Wraith fired again, the pellets tearing into the container he'd just vacated. Wraith and his remaining operatives surged forward, expecting to find him trapped, but Casey wasn't there. He'd used the brief moment of cover to climb atop the containers, moving silently. He heard their heavy breathing, their frustrated shouts. He knew he couldn't stay. He was out of ammo, and his body was screaming for rest. He waited for Wraith to pass directly below him. Then, with a savage yell, Casey dropped, not onto Wraith, but onto the operative directly behind him, slamming him to the ground in a tangle of limbs. He twisted, using the man as a shield, and drove his knee into Wraith's groin when he turned. Wraith grasped, momentarily incapacitated. Casey didn't linger. He grabbed a heavy metal pipe from the ground, swinging it like a baseball bat, knocking out two more operatives who were closing in. He sprinted into the deeper shadows of the industrial park, using the shadows as his cover. He could hear Wraith's furious roars behind him, but they were fading. He was wounded, but alive, and he was free, for now. His mission? Find Sarah. As dawn slowly broke over the eastern seaboard, it revealed a world fundamentally altered. No power, no internet, no communication. Cars sat stranded on highways, their engines dead. Buildings were dark, empty husks. The sudden silence was unnerving, broken only by the sounds of bewildered citizens and the growing sense of desperation. Sarah and Hunter, having found two rugged dirt bikes, roared out of the hangar, the simple engines a welcome rumble in the otherwise silent world. They rode through the desolate landscape, navigating by the paper map. their eyes scanning for any sign of centipede activity or any familiar shield beacon. They were two skilled agents, cut off from their networks, their high-tech tools rendered useless, but they still had their training, their instincts, and their unwavering determination. The world had gone dark, but their mission had never been clearer. They had to warn S.H.I.E.L.D. They had to stop the director. And somewhere out there, John Casey was fighting his way through the chaos, looking for them. The hunt was on in a world that was suddenly raw and unforgiving. The air in the playground's makeshift lab was thick with the metallic tang of burnt circuits and the faint, comforting scent of dust from old components. Emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows as Fitz, hunched over a workbench, meticulously rewired the guts of an antique radio. His brow was furrowed in concentration. Beside him, Simmons held a magnifying glass to a tiny, scorched inductor, her expression a mix of frustration and fierce determination. "It's not an EMP, Gemma," Fitz muttered, more to himself than to her, as he delicately soldered a connection. Not in the proper sense, anyway. Not like a conventional electromagnetic pulse. Simmons hummed in agreement, setting down the inductor. No, the damage profile is all wrong for a true EMP. If it were, everything would be uniformly fried. But look at this, she gestured to a pile of salvaged boards. These analog circuits, these older relays, they're largely untouched. It's almost as if they're immune. Fitz nodded, carefully tightening a screw on the radio. Exactly. When I examined the damage to the systems at the playground, I noticed the effect was remarkably limited. It was almost exclusively confined to the IC chips, and curiously, the inductors. The truly catastrophic damage to other components, the frying, as everyone keeps calling it, that was mostly secondary. The inductors, when they were hit by the pulse, produced massive surges and spikes. That's what caused most of the widespread failures. He picked up a small, fried circuit board, turning it over in his hand. But the initial hit? It's peculiar. The pulse seems to have set up some kind of resonance inside the digital circuits, a specific harmonic, almost like a targeted acoustic frequency. It's what caused the catastrophic failure, the outright meltdown of the digital components, but without physically incinerating them in many cases. That's why almost all of the electrical devices with only analog circuits survived. They simply weren't susceptible to that particular note. Simmons' eyes widened, a spark of scientific excitement overriding her exhaustion. A targeted frequency pulse? That's brilliant and terrifying. It would explain why some older, simpler devices survived and why the core didn't explode outright. She leaned closer to the radio. So, theoretically, the devices that weren't completely incinerated by those accompanying electrical spikes, the ones where the core digital circuitry just resonated to failure, they could be restored. Fitz paused his work, looking up at her, a glimmer of hope in his tired eyes. Yes, theoretically, by canceling out that harmonic resonance, introducing an inverse frequency, a counter vibration, perhaps. It wouldn't be a simple fix, mind you. It would require an incredibly precise counterpulse, specifically tuned. But if we could develop a module, a sort of sonic scalpel for electronics, he gestured vaguely around the darkened lab. That would fix roughly 40% of the digital components, devices, and systems that weren't completely fried by the energy spikes. It's not everything, Gemma, but it's something. It's a way back, a way to fight this analog war with a digital advantage. He turned back to the radio, a newfound urgency in his movements. This old beast, it's pure analog. But if we can adapt its principles, understand how it survived, we might be able to get a comms unit back online. Coulson needs to reach out, Gemma. He needs to know what's happening, and he needs to be able to talk to whoever might be left out there. Simmons picked up a delicate set of tweezers, her mind already racing with calculations. Then let's get to it, Fitz. We have a message to send. She offered him a weary but determined smile, and together, amidst the quiet hum of the emergency generators and the distant sound of rain, they began to sift through the wreckage of the technological world, searching for the right signal to get through. The playground was a ghost of its former self. The vibrant screens of the tactical command center were black, silent monuments to a world that no longer existed. The air, thick with the smell of ozone and burnt circuitry, was still and heavy. Phil Coulson stood in the echoing silence, the beam of a single, battery-powered lantern cutting a stark path through the gloom. His comms unit lay lifeless on the console, a constant, tangible reminder of their isolation. "Any word?" Coulson's voice, though calm, held an undercurrent of raw tension. Agent Davis, operating a clunky, old-fashioned ham radio that Fitz and Simmons had miraculously rejigged, shook her head. "Nothing, sir. Just static. The atmospheric interference is immense. Either the EMP shattered the ionosphere, or there's still a massive power signature acting as a global jammer." Fitz and Simmons, their faces smudged and weary, emerged from the main lab, carrying armfuls of ancient analog equipment. "We're trying to set up a directional antenna on the roof, sir," Simmons reported, pushing her glasses up her nose. "Might be able to punch through to a lower orbit satellite, if any are still functioning and haven't been affected." "It's a long shot," Fitz added, adjusting a pair of heavy goggles on his head. "Most of them would have been fried, and even if we get a signal out, who's left to receive it?" Coulson nodded grimly. He knew the odds. But they were S.H.I.E.L.D. They always fought against the odds. He asked, "What about our people?" His gaze swept over the blank tactical map. "Daisy, May, Morse, Romanoff. Any indications from their last known positions?" Simmons explained, consulting a handwritten schematic. The seismic shock from Daisy's power would have immediately been followed by the EMP at Site Gamma. They were at ground zero, essentially. Their high-tech gear would be useless. We have no way to know their status. "They're alive," Coulson stated, his voice firm, unwavering. It wasn't a hope. It was a command, a truth he willed into existence. "They're trained. They're resourceful. They'll be adapting. Our job is to get this playground back online, make ourselves a beacon in this new darkness, and find them." He turned to a group of agents who were meticulously checking old supply manifests, their faces grim. "Get a full inventory of all non-electronic supplies, food, water, medical, fuel for the generators, and any vehicles that run on basic mechanics. We need to be prepared for the long haul. This isn't a temporary blackout. This is a reset." "And weapons, sir?" an agent asked. "Anything that doesn't rely on a microchip. Old models, blades, weapons that rely on simple kinetics. Every agent needs to be armed and ready. We don't know who else survived this, or what their agenda might be." He thought of the director, of Centipede. They had survived, they had caused this, and they would be making their next move. He looked at Fitz and Simmons. "Our top priority. Re-establish communications. Get that antenna up. Find a way to broadcast, and keep working on that Chitauri dampener. The Centipede device here is still a threat, even if it's inert right now. We need to understand it and neutralize it completely." The two scientists nodded, their exhaustion momentarily forgotten, replaced by renewed determination. This was their expertise, their challenge. Coulson walked to a large map of the United States, an old, paper one, and stared at the blank area where Site Gamma should have been glowing. He tapped the location. "They're out there, adapting. We need to do the same. We are S.H.I.E.L.D. We protect the world, even when the world goes dark." The new reality was stark. No global surveillance, no instant communication, no technological advantage. It was a world of grit, of survival, of relying on analog solutions and human ingenuity. The game had changed, and Coulson knew S.H.I.E.L.D. needed to change with it or be consumed by the silence.
The air inside Site Gamma was cold, still,
and heavy with the scent of ozone and the damp earth of the subterranean facility. Melinda May, Bobby Morse, Daisy Johnson, and Natasha Romanoff moved through the echoing corridors, their tactical lights piercing the oppressive darkness in narrow, shifting cones. The frantic chaos of moments ago had given way to an unnerving silence, broken only by the crunch of debris underfoot and the rhythmic drip of water from unseen pipes. Their high-tech gear was dead weight, useless artifacts of a bygone era. May and Bobby relied on their low-tech sidearms and the familiar weight of their staves, while Daisy's gauntlets were cold, inert metal on her wrists. Natasha, ever reliant on her own formidable skills, moved like a ghost, her senses heightened by the oppressive darkness. "No power anywhere," Bobby confirmed, sweeping her light over a defunct control panel. "Every system fried. This place is a tomb." "Not entirely," May corrected, pointing her light towards the glowing, pulsating red core chamber ahead. The faint, malevolent light was the only functional thing in the entire facility. That thing's still a threat. It just emptied itself, but it's still alive. Daisy, her voice tight, felt a dull ache in her gauntlets. It wasn't an implosion. It was a release. The director used my power to trigger a global EMP. The realization was a bitter pill, a twist of self-blame she would deal with later. Right now, there was only the mission. "He played us," Natasha stated, her voice devoid of emotion, yet carrying a chilling finality. This wasn't about a weaponized explosion. It was about resetting the world, and it worked. They reached the core chamber. General Riker and Dr. Shaw, along with a few remaining Centipede operatives, were slowly stirring, dazed by the EMP, but not incapacitated. Shadow, true to his nature, was gone. "Riker," May said, her voice cutting through the daze, "what's the director's next move?" Riker, shaking his head to clear it, looked up, a twisted sneer on his face. "You think you won? You just paved the way for a new world. Your shield, your precious technology, it's all useless. The director, he's just beginning." He managed to pull a small pistol from a hidden holster, aiming it wildly. Before he could fire, Bobby's stab snapped out, disarming him with a precise, bone-jarring strike. The remaining Centipede operatives, still disoriented, were quickly subdued. "We need to get out of here," Natasha said, her eyes sweeping the room. "This place will be a target once they realize what happened to their core, and the director will want us silenced." "Agreed," May replied. "But first, we secure this." She pointed to the Exodus core. "It's still alien tech, still dangerous. We can't just leave it." Daisy, despite her fatigue, walked towards the core, placing her hand tentatively on the reinforced glass. The faint red glow pulsed against her palm. "It's dormant, exhausted, but it's absorbing ambient energy again, slowly. It'll recharge eventually." "Then we contain it the old-fashioned way," Bobby declared, already looking for anything that could be used. "Heavy-duty chains, concrete, anything we can find. We seal this chamber, and then we figure out how to get to the playground." The immediate priority was survival and regrouping. They spent the next few hours working by the meager light of their flashlights, using sheer muscle and ingenuity to secure the Exodus core. They found heavy chains from a defunct gantry system, old power conduits, and even managed to blast loose sections of rock with scavenged explosives to effectively bury and seal the chamber, ensuring the core wouldn't fall into anyone else's hands or recharge prematurely. With the core secured, their thoughts turned to escape and communication. "No communications are going to work," Natasha reiterated, surveying the surrounding forest from the exit of Site Gamma, now reduced to a heavily fortified cave. "We know the general direction of the playground," May stated, consulting her paper map, now a precious artifact. "It's a long walk. No vehicles will be running." "We'll need supplies," Daisy added, her gaze scanning the immediate vicinity. "Food, water, basic medical, and weapons." They began to scavenge what they could from the now silent facility,
emergency rations, first aid kits, even some sturdy analog tools that could be useful. They found a few old, non-electronic firearms and plenty of ammunition. Their shield training, focused so often on advanced tech, now reverted to its most basic, essential form: survival in the wild. As the sun began to climb higher, casting long shadows through the trees, the four agents set out into the silent, altered world. They were an island of highly trained operatives in a sea of global chaos, carrying the weight of the director's devastating success. Their path to the playground would be long, arduous, and fraught with unknown dangers. They had no idea what awaited them in the darkened world, or if anyone at the playground had even survived.
She's got style to find.